So we have an example of some kit from our sponsors at Proteus, Sam, and that looks like an everyday consumer unit to me. But what you got over there?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And it's kind of a bit of a twist on the modern day consumer unit, which we all now know from Proteus, which always looks so much nicer than probably any of the other ones on the market. But inside here, it's all been adapted for solar PV installations. So inside here, we've got our main switch and surge, which we're kind of used to in the world of modern day consumer units. But what we've got is we've got a double pole bidirectional RCBO, which obviously Proteus were kind of accidentally famous for, as we've spoken to them before on the podcast. So we've got an RCBO there for solar PV, which we could, I suppose, change that out for an MCB if an RCBO wasn't needed. We've then got a 6 amp MCB in here, which could be used for if you've got any like battery equipment or monitoring equipment that you need to take a little power supply for. A lot of these systems have a little meter or something that you need to power. We've then got a rotary isolator inside there as well for your isolation. And then we've got a little generation meter replacement here as well. So this has got a serial number on it, which is what we need for our MCS certificates. So everything in there in one little handy unit, which is pretty cool.
It is, isn't it? It's the way it's all going, I think, where we're seeing lots of the isolation points. I mean, we've had this discussion about if an MCB of itself is suitable or not, but taking that out of the equation, having the rotary isolator in there that we can lock off, nice and simple. I really like it, and I know from the range Proteus have got, they're also looking to include heat pump breakers and stuff as well, so it's kind of this renewables board. So yeah, I really like those, and if you want to check them out, we'll pop a link in the description over to the Proteus website where you can go and do so. But let's get back to the conversation.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Renewables Podcast. Thanks very much for coming back. Before we get into today's episode, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel or even become one of our very valued members of the Renewables Podcast, where you get easy and quick access and early access to new episodes, then head over to Spotify and sign up. It's not much a month, and it really helps us grow as a podcast. So thanks very much for that if you are already subscribed. But we are going to have a chat today about a few different topics, aren't we, Mark? But before we get into those, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, mate. It's been a nice day in the sunshine up on a roof. Myself and Matty Nathan's on holiday up in Scotland. So that was funny. He sent a picture from the top of a mountain in snow while we were in our shorts and T-shirts on a scaffold in the sun in Yorkshire. And you only really get that in the UK, don't you, to be fair? It's a weird and wonderful country we live in. But I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
Good, yeah. I've been locked in the office all day, so I've been in an air-conditioned office. It didn't really matter what was happening outside for me, but I wouldn't say my happy place in terms of the office, but the necessary place. I much prefer to be up with my shorts on up on a roof somewhere, but that wasn't me for today. But I'm excited to go on to this episode because it's a topic that me and you have kind of discussed before, but we've got some updates as to some things are changing in the industry, but also revisiting an old topic. So the first thing we're going to talk about is there's been an update regarding the new MCS side of things, hasn't there?
Yeah, so literally on the drive over here, I was listening to a webinar. I think it was an NIC one, and then I clocked a post as I arrived to say that they have got approval from UCAS to deliver the new MCS scheme that we've all been waiting for. And the message is that carry on as normal, and they're going to start migrating people into this new system. So I assume NAPIT will be the same. I've maybe not seen their post, and it's already out there, and if not, it'll follow shortly. But finally, it looks like MCS, if it's 2.0, 3.0, whatever version we're on, is going to be live at long last.
Exciting, eh? Well, it feels like about 20 years ago since we had Ian ripping on saying that it was going to be just around the corner. I know that in sort of after the first time he'd been on and we've kind of chased him about it, he'd said that it's been taking a little bit of time getting it through the UCAS side of things and all that. So, I think will be really interesting to see how it's implemented and start to see that hopeful change around it being less about your internal complaints procedure, less about all this stuff that doesn't really change what the customer ends up getting. I think it's a fairly fair assessment to say that a lot of the MCS of the past, hopefully now, as this comes in, has been focused on have you filled the right 32 form out to to give the customer so many days to query the proposal or back out, or have you actually fitted those hooks correctly? I feel like we're moving hopefully more towards, have you fitted the hooks correctly? Have you got your structural calculation? Have you done all of the more of the practical side than if you've just ticked the right box on a form that doesn't really give the customer a better installation, or not really. It's just maybe easier for the assessor to pick up that you haven't done something right, whereas it's the nuts and bolts of an installation that is the really key thing that a customer actually is more interested in. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing if that makes a difference and if that comes in, and hopefully we start to see an increase in the quality of these installs. Hopefully.
100%. I mean, you've nailed it there. Who wants to be able to find a piece of paperwork out of a filing cabinet that's going to line up in exactly the way it should do? Not very many, but you want to make sure that the systems are going to stay on their roofs, be safe, serviceable, and work. And MCS need to be thoroughly behind that, underpinning it as the kind of flag bearer in what good standards should look like, and checking that when they come out and do their visits annually, and maybe more of the surveillance visits that you had an experience of as well. And perhaps as this kind of evolves, utilising AI and how systems are notified through the MCS portal to look at images of how a system's been installed. I'm sure there's all kinds of things that they can improve with that as it goes forward. And this is an important first step, I think, a big shift away from office admin, having an extra paragraph about a battery little thing you need in there or whatever they flagged me on the first time we were inspected. I can't remember. I'd much prefer they were looking at, have we tied our cables up off the roof? Have we used matching MC4 connectors? Is it square, plumb and true, sat where it is? That would have been a much better experience. And it looks like that's where we're going. And, MCS have got an important role now. I'd noticed with the heat pump side of things that they are the kind of government operator of the whole grant system. I don't think there's any kind of other parties going to be managing that. I know there's like FlexiOrb who sprung up doing stuff, but from what I was reading last week, it is very much, you do your boiler scheme, grant, whatever it is, it has to be through MCS. So they've obviously been selected by government to look after those things. And if that is the way it's going, they need to hold up their end now, alongside the likes of NAPIT and the NIC. We need to see these people doing their parts and leading the industry rather than lagging it. Because I think we've got a lot of that at the minute where manufacturers and installers are leading this industry with innovation and all the solutions that we're bringing to the fore, and the industry of things and what the baselining regulations are telling us is lagging behind massively. And I think that is contributing to the kind of pricing we're seeing out of industry, where a level of what is considered a satisfactory installation is too low. And one of the things that I wanted to lead the discussion on to was to do with kind of fire safety and, 5 things, it doesn't have to be 5, but that was kind of what I wrote down, of things that could be changed from a regulatory point of view to improve safety. And it was from watching Roger Bisbee, I think is his name, from Skill Builder, who is someone I've watched on YouTube, and I think he's been on TV as well and stuff in the past for ages. He's in all the magazines back in the day as well, sharing articles of general construction. But he was just walking around a housing estate looking at solar PV systems and kind of reviewing the stats that insurance companies had built around solar PV fires. But rather than just focusing on the scaremongering around that, which is really, really easy to do, and I think that's more damaging than helpful, he was looking at the stuff that can kind of stop these things. And it's a lot of the things we've discussed before. You mentioned arc boxes, you mentioned optimization and monitoring, BirdGuard, regular inspection and testing, ongoing maintenance, all this stuff that you'd think is a given and yet isn't regulated or mandated in the standards we work to, which I find crazy.
Yeah, it is. And this is something that, for most installers, they're on board with it. The whole PAS document, whilst we might not agree with absolutely everything within it, it's there to help improve the safety of these systems for the homeowners on, anywhere under 200 square meters. And you kind of like, what's difficult, and we'll get onto some of the things we think could be improved to improve safety, with these systems is how you actually implement that change. How do you actually tell people this is now what you have to do? And in my mind, there's a couple of things there. There's like the PAS, the publicly available specification that was out. The difficulty with that is people kind of go, well, it's only a specification, it's not law, it's not this, it's not that. I do disagree with that. I think if you have something like that comes out that has been agreed and written by all those people that contributed to it, you kind of think they haven't given their time up for no reason. So how do you actually implement that change? Or there's it being changed and put into the MCS specification so that it's not an MCS compliant, installation if certain things haven't been done. And then there's like the regulation side of things in terms of like BS 7671 on the electrical side. Can it be written into that? But then that only comes maybe every 5 years. So it's almost, whilst we can determine what things we need to implement, it's getting it so that when you are pricing against other companies, that like I'm pricing maybe smoke alarms but not bird guard, and you're pricing bird guard but not smoke alarms. It's kind of like, for the customer's benefit, we both need to be pricing smoke alarms and bird guard, so they actually have apples with apples, and not having one company saying, oh, you don't need smoke alarms, it's it's going to be positioned here, you've got one on your landing, that'll be fine. And then me coming along saying, no, you need one in your kitchen, you need one up on your stairs, one in your loft because you've got a rack up there, a data rack, and all this. And the customer's kind of going, well, I don't really know who's right. So I think that's the tricky thing, is whatever does end up coming out to help prevent fire protection, because I think there is a bit of steam behind it now, is where does it go to make it an even kind of playing field for all of us that are in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, the fire side of it is what's really pushing this, because London Fire Brigade do not mess about, as we've seen in the electrical industry with the plastic consumer units, cables entangling firefighters. They want changes to happen. They make them happen, and they're now dealing with these consequences of solar PV fires. This is solar panels rather than the batteries, and maybe that's a historical confidence we've got in our fire barrier of the tiles on our structures in the UK to maybe not worry about that as much as we should have done, and certainly people over in America and Canada do, where a lot of the buildings are wooden construction with bitumen tiles, and they're trying to make sure that they mitigate that risk as low as they possibly can, because you're straight into the fabric of the building if something goes wrong. Whereas in our case, you'd hope it burns out on top of your tile rather than gets into your house. That isn't how it plays out. It does still get through that fire barrier. So we've maybe got that in there. I just think that when we're looking at this and companies are pricing against each other, you will have those that miss out the bird guard, and you will have those who just discount optimization and say, well, it's just for shading, and don't really need to think about that for any kind of safety aspect. They're another point of failure in your system. They're more likely to go wrong than the panels, and all of this mixed messaging gets put out there, and there's customers who are really interested in safety. We encounter loads of them in my business. They come towards us, I guess, because of the content we make, at least similar for you, where they're getting in touch with us because they want that level of installation. But for the mass market, they're generally shopping on price. And if the baseline in standards is where it is, they're never going to be having people carry out their installation from our companies. They're just not. They're going to be in the world of no bird guard, no optimization, monitoring for, your arcs and your over temperatures and all the rest of it. Premium kit, it'll be inverters shonked in lofts with cables drooped all over the floor and all the rest of this stuff that fundamentally can be argued satisfies the intent of our regs in some cases. So I think that needs to be looked at, because there's people of industry out there now, the industry bodies and people who work within the organisations that represent all of us, who are kind of pushing this messaging around fire, and rightly so. We don't want to see PV fires, but not really doing anything to effectively change it. So if you want, in my view, if you want to effectively change it, there's 5 things that I thought of earlier that I'm going to mention that can be done, and reacting to it after the fact isn't one of them. So equipping firefighters with ways of tackling these blazes isn't the solution. It's something that's needed, because there'll always be that rare occasion where something horrible happens, equipment failure, human error, these things will always go wrong, and you want firefighters to be able to deal with that. But the fundamental cause of much of the things we're seeing when it goes wrong is avoidable if we specify a higher baseline in what an effective installation should be. And it isn't that much more expensive in the grand scheme of things, really. And if everyone's pricing to that same higher bar, you don't have the opt-out for a lower, cheaper system as often. And as this mass adoption phase rolls through, we'll be very thankful of taking those changes now rather than equipping firefighters to react to it all later, because we're brewing a bigger problem if we don't.
Yeah, 100%. It's that age-old thing, isn't it, that prevention is cheaper than the cure, because you might be able to, cover the panels over with a big foam gun or whatever it is that they're going to do, but it's, if you, by that point, something's already been on fire, you're going to need some repair works doing, full system strip off, and that's if it hasn't already caught fire to the house, where you then, you're into structural work and everything. Why not try and start at a higher bar? And to be honest, no customer would ever see the difference because everybody be quoting at that higher bar. But yeah, I suppose it takes me back to my thoughts originally. Where would you think, in your view, would be the most powerful place to put that higher bar? Do you think MCS, or do you think insurance companies should be mandating this, or what do you think?
It has to come from a few places. I think MCS is a good one because we've got the kind of standards we all need to kind of follow in terms of the mounting equipment we're using and all the rest of that. And, they have got their framework there already. But I think in BS 7671, you mentioned about PAS, and the Amendment 4 that's rolling through is going to reference to that, if it hasn't changed in the draft public comment phase, that is adopted in regs as something that needs to be done to satisfy BS 7671. So although that's still a non-statutory document, you're going to be very brave to go against that as that changes in March, April, whenever that's released next year. So that's imminent, and that kind of argument of it just being guidance or whatever people are pretending it is gone at that stage. So I think it has to come through the wiring regulations to a degree, MCS very much so. And then it is in the realms of kind of insurers, maybe educating homeowners. They'll generally do that in small print though, rather than actually tell them. So it's a hard thing. I think for us as installation companies, it sits in the bodies that guides us. So NAPIT, NIC, the IET, MCS, all of these people having a joined up approach where they say, if you fit in solar PV on roof, bird guard is essential. There's no option not to have it. I also think that optimization and monitoring of systems should also be mandatory. Don't think there should be a case not to fit it. And I know other installers disagree with that, but I think that the safety aspect outweighs any potential failures of the equipment and the additional costs. I think nowadays the additional cost with a typical optimizer costing like 30 odd quid from the Tiger range, and there's other options out there now. It's not as significant as it once was. And when you look at what they can do, some people have suggested like rapid shutdown, that that takes a minute to enact, and that's true if it's an AC loss that triggers it. But if these systems detect an over temperature or an arc or something that's gone on with a panel, they shut down immediately. There's not that minute wait. It's all in the kind of smart ecosystem and communications that they do to bring it to a safe close. So it could be that we've said this before, but a kid hit a cricket ball onto a solar panel, smashes it up, and if there's no optimizer there, it'll continue to kind of arc and burn away, and eventually it could set itself on fire and the rest of the roof with it. If there's an optimizer there underneath it, it sees that that's happened, shuts it down, stops the generation, and that problem turns into maintenance rather than total failure and potential burning down of a building. So I think that is something else that should be on there. There's loads of other little things that you can consider as well, and it all plays a part. But I think they're two of the big things for me. Is the bird guard, and you will have dealt with loads of this in your time in the industry, getting rid of birds from under panels and the damage they do to connectors and cabling and all the rest of it. And then the monitoring and safety side, and shifting the mindset away from shading for optimizers. That's a perk of an optimizer. They do a great job of that, but it isn't the biggest thing that they do, in my opinion.
No, that's right. I think they have such a benefit. Like we use a lot of solar edge stuff, and when you are able to see a problem that is on someone's roof that is very inaccessible, forget about the rapid shutdown, forget about optimization, just being able to see that panel number 32 of 35 has got a problem is so powerful, because it's a cheaper maintenance job. You can compare panel to panel, so because it's not always that the panel fails or a connection fails. It could be intermittent, and suddenly being able to see that panel 34 that is right next to panel 35 is generating half the amount, but there's no shading on each of those panels because you know where they are. You think, well, why is that one? And then you can interrogate the panel voltage on that coming into that optimizer and go, oh, okay, that's only 15 volts coming through that, whereas that other one's 32. What's going on there? And then you can start to really investigate what's happening in that system without, just being sat in our office like where we are now. And you think, why isn't that something that is just out there? And the reality is that I think a lot of really good installers know the value of it, know that it's the right way forward, but just can't sell it because of this cost squeeze that there is, and people wanting to be the cheapest. I was chatting to, I won't name him just in case it becomes a bit sensitive, but I was chatting to another installer, and he was saying that companies he's up against, who he knows about, have got scaffolders fitting the panels. I'm thinking, how could the boss of that company go to sleep knowing that these scaffolders that will be on an extra X amount per day to throw these panels upon the roof, unless the roofers that went and turned to scaffolders, or they've got some sort of prior knowledge, how are they doing that right? And you just know that company is doomed to failure. And those customers that have gone for it, they're thinking that they're getting the same job as they would do with any other company, and unfortunately, there just won't be, because there'll be anything that these companies can cut out to reduce the cost to get it to be the cheapest ticket price, they will do. And BirdGuard is so cheap, especially it only becomes expensive if you're having to fit it after the fact of an installation being done. So, having that BirdGuard there, it's the cheapest time that it'll ever be to fit it. And that could be a mesh, it could be a spike that drops down, or it could be a solar skirt if you want something more premium. There's difference in cost between all of those, but it's such an easy thing to fit that has such a huge benefit. Like the cost benefit of bird protection is probably the biggest out of anything else you could fit, including optimizers, because you get those birds nesting under those panels. Birds cannot be anywhere near those panels. Then year 6 they just arrive, because we've had that where we've had to go back to not jobs we've done, but other jobs where they go, look, they literally arrived last year, and we have they've never been here before. So it's not that if they aren't there after 2 weeks of the installation, they'll never arrive. It is literally they could turn up in 3 years' time and start annoying the hell out of you, but also damaging connections, creating hotspots under the panels, and just even things external to the panels, filling your gutters full of their mess and their nesting materials, and causing damp because the gutters then aren't working, so the water's just flowing over onto your already brickwork. There's just so many other external problems that birds can be, and it'd be such an easy thing for MCS, in my view, to just go, yep, we've reviewed it. Bird protection wasn't really around back in the feed-in tariff days, but now, looking at all the research that and all the feedback we've got, bird protection is an absolute must, because there's just no reason why it shouldn't be installed now. And that just makes, I think MCS is a really good place for a lot of these changes to come, because they're the place that we're all getting audited from. That's the basis that NIC, NAPIT, whoever it is, coming out, they're the ones that are looking at that standard, making sure we're installing to that standard, and going, you haven't put any bird mesh on this. And they go, oh, well, the customer didn't want it. Fortunately, you've got to have it, because, it can cause bad connections, it can do this, that, and the other. And that does just create that baseline. So, yeah, I think bird protection, optimizers, you mentioned arc boxes, which are an interesting one. What else?
Skills and training.
Skills and training, yeah.
So avoiding the scaffolders that you mentioned. I mean, they may be good fitters. We don't know that they're not, but effective training for people who are going to be delivering this stuff and kind of audit trails that that's actually happened as well. I think we need a higher bar on what it takes to be qualified to install solar PV and battery storage, and it should live in the realms of qualified electricians who've done supplementary training. You might have roofing people amongst their teams fitting the system, but they shouldn't be the sole labour force doing it. I'd seen a video the other day where there'd been some panels been fitted on a warehouse roof, and the installers were just walking over the panels, and it's like, what on earth is going on? And you think there's no real thought or check for that. That'd be a micro crack in a few years that burns a building down. Maybe that'll be the next time anyone realises. It just happened that had been caught on camera, them doing it. So there needs to be a better line in the sand in terms of the training and capability of people doing this. I think a lot of the problems we've got, the solar PV kit in and of itself is very safe. I don't think we've got an issue, generally speaking, with the components. It's the way it's been specified and installed that leads to these problems, and that is mismatched connectors or isolators that aren't tightened up correctly, kit that's never been fit for purpose when it was first specified. It's all avoidable if we increase the baseline in what is satisfactory installation and the people delivering it. I think we've got to be careful of an industry with scaremongering and putting people off. Fires are still really rare, even with the issues we've got. I think the stats have gone up 30% or whatever, but there's still, was it 150 fires or something along those lines, which in the grand scheme of electrical fires in the UK is micro percent. It's a small amount. But, when things do go wrong on top of somebody's roof, it is quite catastrophic, and we want to try and limit that as much as we possibly can. So yeah, that was one of my other ones, skills and training.
I think that's a really interesting one, because something that I think we raised with Ian, or I thought I should have raised with him, I can't remember now, from MCS, Ian Rippin, was potentially like an MCS standard for an MCS roofer. Because one of the issues with the whole new build world is that, we've never really been able to win a very big new build project, because the money that they want you to be at is just a negative. So you kind of, we never really entertain sort of large new build projects. But one thing that can happen in these new build projects is that the roofing contractor gets a little bit of training on how to fit a Marley solar tile, which is basically a Viridian panel, as they were bought out by Marley. But it's kind of like, right, well, then there's a bit of a grey area there in terms of, well, who's providing the MCS certificate for this? Because a lot of the MCS side of things is about the panels, how it's been fitted, this, that, and the other. And then suddenly there's an electrician that comes in that does the inverter side, maybe the battery side, the EV side. And then there's like this bit of a crossover where I'm sure the electrician goes, well, I haven't fitted these panels. So am I providing the MCS certificate for this? And am I putting my name to the fact that they might have not pushed the connectors in, or, I've stripped some Viridian stuff off before on new builds, and they've put half the fixings in and stuff. And you're kind of like, am I putting my name to this? And so I think what an interesting point on that would be that an MCS certificate cannot be put on, say, a new build installation without either the electrician doing it or the company that is actually going to sign it off being the ones to do the panels, or there being a competent roofing scheme where the roofer has gone through checks of his own or her own, and so they are able to provide their competency certificate to do the roofing side. There's some really great solar roofers out there that just do solar roofing. They dangle the MC falls through the loft or wherever, and that's then done. I'm not knocking that, because that's really valuable to a lot of companies that are starting up now that are terrified of the roofing side of things, or even established ones that are terrified of the roofing side of things. And if that's not your bag, that's not your bag. But I think the difficulty becomes when you haven't really got a lot of recourse to go, well, no, that was, solar roofing company X that's done that, and this was their competency certificate to show that they are MCS roofing compliant. And that's how we've been able to give that renewable property or that, that job an MCS certificate because they've been a week or two earlier, they've fitted the panels, and this is their certification to show that they're competent to do so. Because a lot of the fires that I've seen seem to be in roof solar, and that's an extra layer of risk because you haven't got that tile barrier that you mentioned before.
Yeah, it's true, and that was one of the things that Roger had raised in his the membrane that you can fit under the panels that is sort of fire resistant. But I think with certain mounting systems, there's been a issue rolling through with MCS, and some of those, hasn't there, of late, of how all of that's kind of tested and put together, and that's the big worry, that if it's in roof and you straight into someone's loft and it goes wrong, those consequences become much more severe. But yeah, you're dead right with that element of the roofing side of things, because there will be electrical contractors who'd be great solar PV fitters who just don't want to work on roofs, and there needs to be a mechanism there for them. I don't think that needs to be taken away. It just needs to be effectively managed, rather than it just being, right, my scaffolding friends, go chuck these panels on the roof for me. I'll be there next week to connect the inverter up. That shouldn't be a thing, but there has to be a kind of process there outside of that, very much so. I think with the inverter side as well, one of the things that kind of always makes me think is the options you get to turn off some of the protective measures they can deliver. So you can turn off, like, is it AFCI or AFGI, whatever the term, it's basically air leakage detection, isn't it? That you can actually switch that off. I just think that, for something that could stop a system fire or a potential for shock, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, the arc fault stuff, I think it's Canada or somewhere. Because I actually saw once on the Solar Edge setup. I was like, what the hell is this? I've never. This was years ago now. I remember looking at it thinking, I have no idea what this AFCI is. I'm like, what's that? So I look at it, and it came up on a application note for Solar Edge saying that it's got this arc fault circuit interrupter or something like that, it's called, and that you can toggle it on and off. And I'm thinking, and it came right at the bottom. It said that this is mandatory in, I'm sure it's North America and Canada, something like that. Probably because they're all made of wood and what have you. And yeah, you could toggle it on. I'm like, well, why is it not just on? Like, well, if it's already in the inverter, why not have it just on? And I think the SIG stuff has that built in, and a lot of these others that are probably operating in that same market as Solar Edge do will have a lot of this built in, I would assume, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to operate in that market. So why are they not just going, well, just turn it on? Let's just turn it on and make these systems safer. So yeah, it's a bit perplexing that. I don't know why we feel like, oh, well, the UK doesn't need to be as safe as Canada. It's like, well, why? Well, what's the logic behind it?
Exactly that. That was the kind of my logical approach to it. That we'll just switch all this stuff on. I want it all on. I'd rather have an alert that something's gone wrong in the system than dealing with a fire on someone's roof. It's like, let's have fault codes thrown at me rather than that other option. So we always switch all of those things on, and just didn't make any sense that you even had the ability to turn it off. It's like, if it's going off, it's going off for a reason. So I'd rather it was there. And I think that's some of the things that our industry of things lags behind on stuff like that. That's why I've referenced a few times that I think they need to lead a bit more with this, and it's difficult for them because it does spill into like product standards away from wiring standards, but they are messing in those pools already with pen fault detection and inbuilt RCDs and such, and there is so much crossover now, it's unavoidable for them. I think they need to raise that level across the board to have a higher baseline. Because for us, we're saying like BirdGuard, it's a small cost. We're saying like optimizers are a small cost, but that all contributes to the labour time frame. And so many of these companies that are rinse and repeat want to be in and out in a day, and they'll cut away all of the fat that they can to that very bare bones so they can be in and out in a day. Money in, job finished, next one. And if they know they've got to deliver it to that standard because they can't sign it off if they don't, and they need a picture for the MCS notification to show the BirdGuard on the panels, and they need to be able to show optimizers looking after the system or whatever it is we're saying their standard ends up being, it's a much fairer playing field for us all pricing against that, and consumers have a better prospect of safe and compliant systems rather than ones that more than likely can go wrong at some point. usually without catastrophic results. It just stops working. That's the reality. The fires are still really, really rare. Again, that's why I keep referencing that. I think we are getting a lot of scaremongering out there of things, and we need to be careful of that because it can really switch people off to these technologies that can be transformative, as we've spoken about before, stopping electricity bills and all the huge upsides. While we talk about the risks, we put people off from even wanting to have it. But yeah, just having a higher baseline, I think there's like really simple steps that can be taken that aren't that costly to consumers at the end of the day. Some of these companies out there that are working off £100 a job will have to raise their standards a bit higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the whole seatbelts thing. It's kind of a little bit before my time, the whole seatbelts thing. But it's kind of like, rather than just saying, every blue car needed a seatbelt, it's kind of like, well, just all cars and vehicles need a seatbelt. It's like, why not just take that approach and go, what are the negatives of introducing this? The cost to consumers goes up a little bit, right? Okay. But if everybody is doing it, then surely that means that the marketplace has increased their costs slightly, but you're not going to get this chopping and changing where people go, oh, well, it's not quite guidance, it's a recommendation, or, and then there's companies like, I know we would go, and we already kind of do anyway, and go, well, you need the bird guard because it's just so much better than having the pigeons nesting under your panels. And if that's in an MCS standard, you kind of go, well, that is now for every installation, apart from probably ground mounted, you need bird guard, and that's that. There's no quibble. There's no loophole. You need bird guard on it, so deal with it. And I think that's the tricky thing with sometimes when they bring out these things like the whole PAS side of things. I totally understand why they had to bring it out in that way, but it's kind of like we need some meat, we need some strength behind it to go, this has been released now, you have to follow this, rather than just it being sort of trickled out and kind of people going, oh, well, it's not quite, it's more guidance than it is, being enforced. You can get around it, it's optional. If we're really going to affect change, it has to have some teeth, it has to have some meat, where people go, this is now how we have to work. And there'd be no way around it, because, like you've said, I think lifting that baseline means that it's actually a lot fairer for every installer, and the positive effect is that we don't have bird problems on the panels. It's like nobody likes going up onto a roof and fitting bird guard retrospectively. It's horrible. It's one of the worst jobs, and that only makes the industry worse, because then people are like, well, I can't get anywhere to come and even fit bird guard, and there's all this thing around pigeons are protected and they can't move the nest, and oh my god, what an absolute nightmare it is to actually deal with it. You don't make any money from doing it either, really, because it always takes you twice as long as what you think, and it's taken time away from doing other installations. So I think doing that right from the start is just a no-brainer, and it makes me so cross when I see people not doing it, because I'm thinking, have you even offered that to your customer? And if you haven't, they've turned it down, fair enough, there's not an awful lot else you can do about it. But if it was absolutely enshrined that you have to have it, then you kind of go, look, we can't fit your solar without it. And it just seems like such an easy win for the whole industry. But I'm getting back on my bird protection pedestal again.
It's the teeth to it all. You're exactly right when you reference that we're often left to interpret guidance that's pushed towards us, the installers. And I've seen it said that installers need to do a better job of explaining to consumers about the benefits of paying for this stuff and all the rest of it. But I'm sorry to say the harsh reality is most people do not care. They just look at the bottom numbers at the bottom of the page and think you're trying to rip them off if you're not among the cheapest prices in the mass market of things. That is the way it works. And the only real way to change that is having that higher baseline and some teeth there for diligent installation companies to fairly compete in that mass market. And at the minute, we haven't got them, and that has to come from the industry of things. It is not up to installation companies to make that happen. We can't. We've tried. We have those conversations week to week with customers who come back to us saying, "Why are you so more expensive?" And you explain it till you're blue in the face. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference.
No, you say to customers, well, have you read your proposal? Have you watched the video attached where we go through your proposal? Oh no, I'm not yet. But then in your mind you're thinking, well, you're coming to me saying I'm too expensive, but you've not watched or read what we've included and why we've included it. And you're kind of like, well, if that's where we're going to say that it's our responsibility as installers to inform customers, what more can we do than writing it in a proposal, putting a video together, and explaining why we've included it, and releasing content online in terms of, on YouTube or on whatever, explaining the benefit, which I've been doing for like years as to why we've fitted BirdGuard and the benefits of solar scale, the benefits of mesh and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's only important, to be honest, to those customers that have the money to be really selective about the installer that they choose, and they're happy paying a little bit more because they see the value in using me or you or all the other great installers out there. But for the people that are on a tight budget, that know they want solar PV, that they won't care if, it should ideally have bird protection on because they've seen one of my videos or one of your videos. If it's not mandated, then they'll choose someone that is and save 500 quid, 600 quid because they've got a tight budget. Whereas if it was mandated, they would have no choice. It would have to be fitted. And I think it's absolutely ludicrous to say that it's our responsibility as an installer to educate people on that. We're not there to necessarily educate every single customer. We're there to sell them a good system at a good price, install correctly, maintain it, and get them going. If we want to affect a change, it has to just be mandated, and that is it. I just don't understand the whole argument around it. It seems like we're just trying to skirt around a problem that is just so simple to fix, and we can all move on with our lives.
Yeah, exactly that. And it would be really easy for them to do. I think the industry of things are scared of a lot of the technology that's out there because it isn't a traditional protective device they're used to, so they don't want to say use optimizers or whatever else. So they're really cautious with that. I think they need to get a bit braver and accept that that's the world we're in with this stuff. And if you want to include it in our regulations and guidance, then you need to step up and start understanding that that's something that will be at play. And the last kind of thing on my list before we wrap this one up, because we are hitting the limit time-wise, is ongoing maintenance. Something else that I think is too often neglected. And if that lives in the realms of MCS, I guess we're outside of that process by then. That might be more in the realms of insurance. And we have that problem with EICRs anyway. For homeowner occupied, how many are having their houses tested every 10 years? Probably hardly any. So if you've got solar PV, there needs to be that kind of encouragement that you've got this on your home. You need to look after it. Someone needs to come in and test it every 5 years or whatever we're saying that is. That has to happen because you can flag up those problems with your age systems. Could be that birds have moved in and caused some damage, or that something's hit a panel without an optimizer on it. Testing, maintenance, make sure that gets done as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think we're right in the midst of releasing. We've kind of soft released a thing called Oval Care, and this isn't a plug for it, but it's recognising that this is coming down the track, because we've had quite a few commercial jobs now where they've been in touch and said, look, we had a system fitted 10 years ago. We've just renewed our insurance, and now they want to see our inspection history of our solar PV system. And I'm like, okay, that's great, Mr. Smith. When did you last have it inspected? Well, we've got the test report from when it was installed. I go, so the answer to that question is 10 years ago. Yes, it is. Right, okay, great. So we'll come out and we'll send a drone up, which a drone, 200 quid. It's not a small amount of money, but it kind of is for the cost of a full install and everything. Send the drone up, you can see absolutely everything there. A little heat gun as well, we've got that as well, so we can see, before we touch anything, we do a heat gun scan of the inverters, the switch gear, and everything as it's operating, so we can see if there's any hot spots on it. And it's quite interesting when you see that as to what parts of the system do get warm, and taking photos of that, doing your DC testing, doing your AC testing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a full strip everything out. You're there to see if there's anything that is going to cause or potentially cause an issue in the future. Our budget didn't quite stretch to a thermal imaging drone. I saw some in Munich, and I think they were about 5 or 6 grand, and I was like, wow, I can't stretch to sending that up on Mrs. Smith's 10 panels in York. I can't really stretch to that. But stuff like that, as it gets cheaper, and seeing hot spots on panels, things like that, it will become so much cheaper. So yeah, absolutely. I think maintenance is a really big one, and we're kind of saying, to be honest, a minimum every 2 years for that, if not more. Our electrical side is usually every 5 years, but if we're doing it every 2 years, then we're well under that. And I do think, as minute as it is in terms of the percentage of fires that are caused by solar PV, I think insurers will be on this, and I kind of welcome it because I do. It's another revenue stream for solar installers as the market peaks and troughs, and I've seen it do that, and we're in a bit of a peak at the minute, but it will pop at some point. But I think it's actually just so much safer to have people looking at these systems and inspecting, certainly DC isolators, not all the rest of it. I think there's massive issues with how some of this stuff has been installed, and hopefully catching that before it catches fire to the property is, oh man, it'll be the best money that homeowner spends.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think that's a great way to wrap that conversation up. I've kind of covered all of my little 5 points I had, unless there's anything else
No,
you
you
want
came prepared, mate. You came prepared,
chuck up
and
there.
I feel like I've aired some of my grievances about things now. But yeah, it's been a bit of therapy for me as well.
Yeah, I just think it's frustrating, isn't it? I think a lot of us installers feel that frustration, and we are kind of hoping and relying on the industry of things coming together and giving us a bit of teeth, as you alluded to earlier on in this chat. It's exactly what we do need, and certainly with maintenance, if you've just covered off there as well, I think that is something that we need a better mandated approach towards, that's maybe set out a bit more clearly in our regulations and with MCS and such as well going forward, because at the minute I think they're a bit loose around this 5 years and quite what that means and all the rest of it. I think there has to be a bit of awareness raised on that front as well. And maybe us as installers can play our part on that. But yeah, certainly got a lot of that off my chest, having seen Roger's video and also the eFix guys. Actually, I forgot to mention them earlier on. They did a live chat with some people from London Fire Brigade. There was some interesting conversations in there, and whilst it is reacting to the problem when we're kind of in the realms of helping the fire service, it's already too late at that stage. They're the ones who've got to go and deal with this stuff, and it's horrible for them. Fundamentally, we want to stop it from occurring. I think that's the actual solution. And if we focus on that, rather than dealing with the consequences, we'll be in a much better place as an industry going forward, would be my kind of closing statement on that. But thank you all very much for bearing with us through that conversation. If you've got views on this, if you think what we're saying makes sense, or you've got a different view altogether, please do drop it in, as always, in the comments. Share this out as well amongst your network, so hopefully help us reach a few other varied views and opinions. And if you want to come on and discuss things like this with us, reach out as well. We're open to have conversations with absolutely everyone in the renewable space. We've got other guests lined up who we've got episodes with coming soon as well. Thank you to those of you who've subscribed over on Spotify, and to everyone who's following along with us on YouTube. We really, really appreciate it, and we will catch you on the next one.